Like it. Greetings, everybody. Uh, Rita, Harold, I think I know most of you, but for those that don't, I'm your host, Steve Anshell, and with me today is Jimmy Beech, who will be making this presentation, Introduction to Exposure X6. Um, Jimmy is a professional photographer and also an instructor for exposure software. He'll be showing you what Exposure X6 is capable of and why you may want to switch from Lightroom. The two important differences between Lightroom and X6, in my opinion, is the way the two programs interface with your images. Lightroom uses a catalog system, and X6 directly accesses your images from your computer files, which is easier, more intuitive for most people. The other difference are the creative presets bundled with X6. As most of you are creative photographers and not working for the press corps, these presets are a real asset. Now, I'm not here to sell you this program. Watch the intro and then decide if you want to switch, use it as a plug-in in Lightroom, or not at all. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jimmy. Jimmy, you're on. Jimmy, you're muted. Let me unmute. Donna, are you the host, Donna, or am I the host? Okay, there you go. Jimmy, I think I have Jimmy muted. Are you able to come on?
I think so. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent.
I'm going to switch Donna back to, I'm switching Donna back to the host because she's more competent than I am. There you go, Donna, you're host again.
Yay, you're all under my control now.
And remember, everybody, this is where the magic happens.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot for the introduction. Hi, everybody. My name's Jimmy Beech, and I work with Exposure Software. So welcome. This is a fundamentals demonstration that we're going to go over today. The Exposure X6 is our advanced non-destructive raw photo editor and organizer. It handles your full post-processing workflow you can use it to copy images from your camera card, or you can apply adjustments to edit those images. You can apply creative effects, export finished photos, and you can even print directly from within Exposure. So a little tidbit on some history of Exposure is that quick history lesson. About 15 years ago, Exposure was created for film photographers. At the time, most film photographers were struggling with the transition from working with analog film, and then they were to working with digital-only capture and processing. So Exposure's accurate film emulation presets were really just what they needed, which gave them the feel of look of film that they were used to in a digital environment. So, so we're gonna make sure that there's time for questions for anybody out there, but feel free to type them in the chat here now, and we will address them. If I don't during the presentation, then we will there at the end. I think that was what we discussed previously. So just make sure we're all on the same page there. So let's take a look at what makes Exposure so amazing. Aside from, me and this presentation. No one's laughing. Oh, everyone's muted. No one can hear. Okay. Well, anyway, the audience is tough today, folks. All right. Anyway, I'm going to hit tab and open up. This is Exposure that you see on the screen. So I'm going to hit tab and I open up both my panels or my docs here. And then you can see over on the left-hand side, we have the folders panel. I'm going to open it up. Here, we'll close down all this other stuff. So we're just looking right here at the folders panel. So this is Exposure. Welcome to Exposure. So the first place where we go and begin processing images is when we're copying them from our camera card. So in Exposure, if you put a camera card into your computer, Exposure will recognize it and then will open up the copy photos from card dialog. It looks just like this. So we can click on a camera card. I have one here attached, and it's just an old card that I had laying around, has some images on it. So as those things begin to process, we can see it's a quick step-by-step process to bring images in to Exposure to import or to copy them from a camera card. So Exposure handles lots of different raw files in addition to TIFF files, JPEG files, DNG files, and even Photoshop PSD files. So notice the numbered sections here at the top of this panel. Sorry, I just got an alert. Everyone. Okay, anyway. So notice the numbered sections at the top of the panel here. And that is, you can see select source. That's the first step. And this is where we select where the images that we're going to copy from are located. So you can see as in this example, I selected the camera card. And you can select multiple camera cards, or you can select external drives or whatever, if that's how you work. So step 2 is right here in the middle. That's where you review the images and you select which ones you want to copy here in the center. And then over here on the right is step 3. And this is where you set where you want the images to be saved on your computer. So we can set, where the destination, that's where the files are saved, where the folder's located. You can create a folder with subfolder hierarchies right here, so that as you copy your images over, they're automatically filed into folders with subfolders. You can rename those files however you'd like them to be renamed. If you have a photo naming sequence that you always use, or photo naming cycle or type. Excuse me, sorry about that. And then we have metadata down here on the bottom. And this is where you can apply things like keywords. You can apply naming information for your images here. And then you can also, wanted to say here on the destination, you can actually create backup copies, which I wanted to point out as well. And if you have a file type that's not supported by exposure, you can convert it to a DNG. If it's like an old computer or something like, or an old photo from my camera, obscure camera from a long time ago. Anyway, okay. So after you have your images selected, you click OK, and it'll start the copy process. It says down here on the bottom, it says 116 files. That's what I have selected on this card. And then once I click OK, it's going to copy those to my computer where I have it designated. So I'm going to say hit cancel because I've already done that, and we don't just want to watch that stuff happen. But now, let's say we've copied images to our camera card, or we've copied images from our camera card onto our computer. And now is when I want to point out that we don't have a catalog in exposure. There's no modules either. So mode modules means that all of the tools that you want to use inside of exposure are available all the time. So all of your commands are there. And no modules, or no catalog, excuse me, means that you can, you don't use a catalog. So your edits are stored in small sidecar files within the image folder. So let me pull up a Windows or a Finder window for you here. So as we can see here, inside of exposure, we can have the desktop, and then we have photos. And you can see that we have a bunch of photos in here from different photographers inside the exposure window. And if I go here and bring up my Finder window, if I go to the folders desktop, then we can, or photos folder, excuse me, on my desktop, then you can see that all of these folders inside of that photos folder are named the same way. So we are really just looking at the same thing that we have saved on our computer right here. So because we don't have a catalog, we don't have to worry about managing it. It makes it a little bit quicker. And if we go to one of these folders, inside is our sidecar files, and that's this folder right here. And you can see we have sidecar files from Exposure EX6 right there. Okay. So we do this for a couple of reasons. There's no single point of failure should something go awry when you're working with no catalogs. And it's a little more efficient, so the performance is a little quicker as well. All right, so let's talk about organizing images inside of Exposure. So we've just looked at our organizing structure and how it's the exact same as what's on your computer hard drive. So there's no new learning curve here when you're dealing with the catalog. So your file management capabilities like delete or move or copy, etc., you can access them right here in the folders panel. You just right click, and then you can reveal this in Finder. You can cut, copy, you move to trash, etc., etc. If you want to make a new folder, you can do that here as well. I want to make sure I have a list here of things, so I'm looking at it right now. So if it gets silent, it's not because I fell off the planet. All right, so again, there are no, you can immediately begin images when you're working with exposure. So if you're doing like a larger transfer, like I used to do work on weddings a lot, and so I'd have thousands of images that I would need to import all at once. So once though the import begins or the copy from card process begins, then you can go ahead and start to edit those images. You can work on them and organize them immediately. So it's really quick. Okay, so let's talk about culling. Actually, let me talk right here while we're in the photos folder, or we're in the folders panel. Down at the bottom, we have collections. Now, collections are a way to group together images from various locations on your hard drive. And they're a great way to, and they don't fill up your computer with duplicates. So you can see here, wait, that's the wrong thing. You can see here inside of collections that I have a bunch of collections that I've made. And when I click on each one, then you can see that I've made a collection here. These are images from Andrea Olivieri. And then inside collections, you can make hierarchical collections as well. So all of these images are from him, and these ones are all summer images that are from him, and these ones are all images from him with water, et cetera, et cetera. You see how that could work. So you can make as many as you want for managing your photo projects, and you can create as many sub collections as you would want to for an easy to navigate hierarchy, just like we have here. So if you have a lot of work and you need to organize and get through it quick, collections is a great way to do that. So let's go back here to our desktop and go to a folder, and we'll talk about culling images. Nope. Okay, exposure uses, here we go. Nope, that's it. Okay, exposure uses flags, stars, and color labels for sorting your images, very similar to Lightroom if you've used Lightroom before. So you can use those to sort and filter out images really quickly. So if you're trying to find an image in particular, you can use these things to sort through them really quick. So inside of exposure, I have a lot of things going on the screen here, but inside of exposure, I'm going to assign, you can see on the bottom of each one of these images are our options for culling, or I'm sorry, for marking these. So I'm going to mark it with a flag here over on the left-hand side. Click it once. You can see it has a white border around it now. That's a flag as pick. This one right here, I'm going to click it once. You can see its flag is pick. Click it again. It's now, that's a reject. And you can see that it gets a little bit darker when I do that. Now we can do this a little bit quicker with the keyboard shortcuts on the, we can use keys on the keyboard as shortcuts to make this a little quicker. So we push plus on the keyboard to make that one a pick. We can make one a reject with minus, and we can use the keyboard or the arrow keys on the keyboard to navigate through those images really quick. So we can also use keyboard commands like if we hold down shift and use that as a modifier. So if we hit on shift, and then let's say that we're going to keep this image, I'll hold down shift and hit plus, and it automatically advances to the next image in the folder. And the same thing, hold down shift. So this makes it a little bit quicker because then I don't have to hit a couple of buttons for, a pick, a reject, or et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let me point out a couple of more things, and that's star labels. Star labels are listed right here on the bottom of these images. Let me make these a little bit larger, which you can't see. Come on, there we go. Okay, so star ratings are right here on the bottom of each image in the grid view. So if we click an image, double click it, it's going to make it full size. If we hit escape, we're back to the grid view. Okay. We can mark our, or we can assign a star rating here, 1 through 5. We can use the 1 through 5 on the keyboard, do the same thing. And you can use the keyboard arrow keys, same way to get through the images and to mark them, just like that. So same thing applies here. If we hold down the shift key and then we apply a star rating, for example, then it automatically advances to the next image in the batch. Okay. So this actually does save you a heck of a lot of time when you're going through and culling a bunch of images, especially when you have some duplicates where there's some that are very similar. You can zoom into them like in full size view like this. So if we go to Land tab, so now we see them in full size view, and I just hit the arrow key there to go to the next image, and I can hit, you know, shift and plus to flag that one as a pick, you know, same kind of way. And then it's going to automatically go to the next image in that folder and pull it up. Okay, I'll hit tab. Okay, so let's, okay, so I have all of these things that assigned now. Oh, I haven't talked about color labels. Color labels are on the right-hand side on the bottom. You can see we have red, yellow. If you right click on it, you can see the different options that you have right here. So you can select different colors to apply, you know, for different uses, let's say. So I can use this for red could mean that I'm going to share that to social media, or orange or yellow could be I'm going to print that, you know. And then as I go through and I sort all these images out, then I can use my filters right at the bottom to select my filters. So if I want images that I applied at least a 3-star rating to, then I can just select that. And then if I want to further, you know, refine that selection, then I can say anything that has 3 or more stars and has a yellow filter, if that makes sense. So it makes it really quick to kind of sort through and call your shoot down or edit the shoot down to the top images that you actually want to spend the time to process. I don't know about you guys, but when I go out and shoot, I don't process every single image that I take. I'm not there yet. Maybe Steve's there. Okay, anyway, let's talk about raw processing now. Actually, before I do that, I did mention some keyboard shortcuts, and before I just blabber on about keyboard shortcuts, I do want to say that they're all found right here within the product, so you don't have to, or within the software, so you don't have to worry about that. In the help menu, keyboard shortcuts is listed right here at the top, as is the manual. So both of these are great places to look when you, or if you're ever in a place of confusion and you need something, and you have some questions to be answered, you can go right there. So keyboard shortcuts, manual. Okay, so let's talk processing now. So I'm going to go to another. Yeah, sure.
Hi, it's Donna. Was that
Hi.
yeah, sure to me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this might be just a general overview. And could you explain how Exposure 6 differs from Lightroom? Because I think everybody here is used to using Lightroom. And what are some of the advantages of using it? Or would that come later?
Okay. Well, a lot of the tools that I'm showing right now, there are similar tools in Lightroom. They might even operate the same. A lot of the things, you know, if you are a Lightroom user, then you'll feel very at home inside of Exposure. The non-destructive workflow inside of Exposure and the fact that we don't have a catalog is really the biggest difference between Exposure and Lightroom. So inside of Lightroom, when you go to import images, you have to import images, and then no, you do not need to buy 2 copies of Exposure, Susan, just 1. If you're importing images inside in Lightroom, you have to import your images onto your hard drive. You have to copy them from the camera card or wherever you have them saved, and then put them on your hard drive or your computer. And then you have to let Lightroom build its catalog and thumbnails, et cetera, depending on how you have it set up. And because of that, you can lose it. I mean, well, it's kind of cumbersome. It takes some time for your computer to process, takes some time for your computer to do. So inside of Exposure, like, you don't have that at all, right? So I think that's kind of the biggest thing that makes Exposure completely different. So I think I don't know if you can edit PSDs directly in Lightroom. You might be able to now. Hopefully that answers your questions there. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to pipe up.
Yeah, it did. Thank you, Jimmy.
No problem. Okay, so let's talk about editing, because a lot of the time, like, we've gone through photo organizing, but let's actually talk about editing the images now. This is the fun stuff. And Exposure does things a little bit differently, and I think you'll be able to see it right here. So, okay, for example, so we just used our filter before. I'll close this for a second. We just used our filter before where we used, what was it, a yellow filter, and it was 3 stars and above. Right here, we can use metadata to filter out images. So in this folder that I'm looking at, because it's just another folder on my hard drive, right? So I just went down to another folder of images. I have images here that are PNG. Some of are NEF files. Those are raw from Nikon. This one's a JPEG. And so I know for the demo, I want to edit raw images to show you guys the capabilities of exposure. So right here inside of the filter by metadata search bar, I'll just type NEF. And then will filter that folder for me automatically. So I just see the NEF files, all of the raw ones. Okay. It makes it pretty easy and quick. All right, cool. So I'm going to close the folders panel since we have all of our images here that we're going to work on. And let's talk about processing. Okay, so when you're processing images, typically there's 2 things that you do. You correct issues in the photos that are, typically the first things that I would do. And then you do some creative things to them. Excuse me. Does exposure do anything with a PDF? You mean like read and edit PDFs? I don't think so.
Jimmy, I can't see the question. I can unmute people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think people are questioning you.
Sorry, I'll read them out then.
Oh,
Somebody, Susan said she uses a desktop and a laptop. Would she have to buy 2 copies of exposure to use them on both of those computers? No, you only need to have 1 version of exposure. You can use it on 2 computers. Next thing is, can exposure do anything with a PDF? No, I don't believe that's a supported file format. Sorry.
okay, if folks could put the questions to everyone, then I can see them and I can unmute you if you need to ask Jimmy something directly.
Okay, I just got another question, but that's fine. Let me continue with my demo here real quick. And then, okay, yeah, no, that's a good question, Tony, and I'm going to address that. So we'll chat. Okay, anyway, let me get back to editing, and then that'll open up another can of questions because I think there's going to be a bunch of questions that people have. But that's cool. It's part of the process. All right, so we are raw processing. We're going to process our raws. So the first thing that we're going to do is do some corrections. So first step in the process here would be lens correction. So you can correct issues in, you can use automatic or manual lens correction and exposure. You can see this image here in the lens correction panel. It does not have a supported lens, where if I go right arrow key, this one does, because it has the profile right here. You can see it listed. So we can use that automatically, or you can turn it off, or you can do it manually if you want to. So lens correction, other thing, detail panel or sharpening. So sharpening inside of exposure is great. You can also use noise reduction as well. This is another thing that you would do. So you'll add sharpening. So when you start out your workflow, your first thing you'll do is you'll do lens corrections, and then you'll add things like sharpening and noise reduction. So that's what's here. So if you want to add sharpening inside of exposure, you can just drag it up and it'll apply on the image. Let me close this so you can see it. And if you hold down the Alt key while you set these other ones, and then you can see it'll give you a preview on the screen, a live preview of what the radius is affecting the image. You can see. Same thing with the masking slider. You can see which edges you're actually applying the sharpening to if you hold down the Alt key, just like that. And that way you don't put too much overkill sharpening. You're only selecting these edges here, just like that. And then noise reduction is the same kind of thing. Usually I zoom way in when I'm doing noise reduction. This image doesn't have a lot of noise in it, so I don't really even need to turn this one on. But yeah, usually I zoom in really close when I'm doing noise reduction, but that's usually kind of the first steps of the process. Is I'll do lens correction, then sharpening and noise reduction. And then after that, there'll be any kind of transform, and that's right here. Transform tools are like any skew or perspective differences or issues or things like that with the image. That's kind of where when I start the process, those are the things that I do. And so there's a whole list of tools that you can get to here. Okay, so next step is creative editing. But before we get on to that, let's talk about just applying some basic edits to an image. That's really where the process begins typically. Now, inside of Exposure EX6, we have automatic adjustments that are really handy, and they can get you on the way of processing your images quickly. And they're intelligent corrections, so that you can apply them to a whole batch of images and kind of identify which ones are your best ones out of a group. If you have a group of similar images, you can process them all at the same time. Anyway, you just select the lines button icon next to auto, and you can set which one of the auto corrections you want to apply to your image, and then you can set the strength of each one of those intelligent corrections as well. So for things like landscapes, I would use the haze control to remove atmospheric haze effects from the image. But for a portrait like this, I probably wouldn't remove that, so I'm going to turn that one off. Exposure bias sets if your exposure level when you're using the auto exposure. If your exposure bias level sets the resulting brightness level, let's say, of the image. So if I'm going to turn it, I'll just leave it kind of right in the middle there. So then you just hit auto here, and you can see that it applied those adjustments automatically to that image. So we can do that to all of those images in this batch. Oop, this one's been processed. So let me go back, and I'm going to reset all of these images to raw, and then I will select them all, and I will apply the same auto adjustments to all of them. And we can see that that didn't quite work out the way we'd hoped to with all of them, and that's okay. We'll fix that. Okay, so now we have some auto adjustments that have been made in this image. So with that, now we can apply our presets because it's been tuned and ready to go. So I'm going to open up the presets panel over here on the left-hand side. And then you can move these docks and stretch them and things like this to make them work for your needs. So I may do that really quickly just because I work in this program often. Okay, I'm also toggling between a couple of different view modes here. Presets inside of Exposure are organized by type, but there's a whole bunch of them. So I know my way around. I like to look at the list view. So I'll usually use a list view like this, just so that I can hover down through the presets really quick when I'm looking for a specific adjustment or a preset. Okay, so let's close all of those. Okay, so they're organized by type. Exposure's rendering engine really was built to accurately emulate film, even down to the subtleties of individual film grains. So the presets in Exposure really simulate a variety of iconic films. The presets, you can be used unmodified, or they can be used as starting points for your own creative editing. You can also use multiple presets together to mix and blend them into any creative option that you can think of. Presets are organized into categories again, to make it easy to find what you're looking for. And again, multiple presets can be used and layered together. So we did apply some auto adjustments to this image already. And since we've done that, we can right click and apply a new layer with preset here, which will separate the preset in the layers panel over here on the right. It will separate the edits from what we did here on the base layer to what is now being applied in the preset. Now we can do that so that we can easily blend the opacity of this and turn the opacity of the layer and the effect down so that it blends back in with the original image. And then that enables us to add more presets in that same fashion, where I right click and add another preset in its own layer. And then I can take that and do the opacity the same thing there. So now I'm just blending these presets together to create my own unique look for this image. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'm going to delete that layer. There we go. I'm going to delete this layer too. Okay, cool. So I will just go. We're going to come back to layers because they're very important, but I'm just going to find a nice, like, middle of the road something for a preset for a portrait like this. the presets in the color films print and color films print low contrast folders are really good for these kind of images. So I'll just go with this one, Kodak. NC, it means neutral contrast, I think. VC is, I think, oh, what was that? No, vibrant contrast. Anyway, for those film nerds out there like me, neutral contrast, I'm pretty sure that's what NC means. It'll be on Jeopardy tomorrow. Okay, so we have our preset applied to this image now, and we've done a little bit of just minimal processing on it. We can go with some more processing to edit this image out. I'm going to close down the left-hand dock. Boop. I said close. There we go. I think I hit undo after I applied the auto adjustments on this layer. There, see, that's right. It's a good thing it's really hard to duplicate that. Yep, I'll be here all week. Okay, so remember how I adjusted on this auto adjustment that we made earlier? And I moved that exposure bias slider down to about middle of the road. I'm going to move that up now and hit auto again. And you can see it's way brighter. So all I'm doing is just adjusting how bright I want that end level or end image to be with that slider. There, that's better. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about editing the image a little bit further now. So now we've taken our image, we've copied images in, we've looked at organizing them, we've shown how we can do some automatic adjustments to kind of edit those quickly to correct some issues in the image, and then we've applied a preset on top of that. So now we have a unique look right here, our Kodak portrait layer, just to give it a little bit of pop. And now I want to get rid of this little, I think this is watermelon here on her cheek. She's super adorable. Anyway, so I'm going to do that. Also, let's talk about cropping, which I think I'm going to do to this image. You can see that she's not perfectly centered in there with her hands on both sides. And I know that I don't know. It bothers me, okay? So I'm going to bring that in so that she's more in the center, just like that. I think it'll be read a little bit better. Okay, so you can use the crop tool. You can also, when you're using the crop tool, you can also use the, move the angle here, the angle slider, or you can use the level tool here to draw a line in the image to automatically level it just like that. I'm not going to do that. Let me go back to my other crop. I was just showing it off. Okay, there. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's talk about blemish removal now. So right here is a little Band-Aid icon. I'm going to select that, and you can see that it's opened this panel. This is the brush tool panel. We have heal and clone modes for this brush tool, or for this tool. I think I'm saying it wrong. This is the clone. Yeah, the heal tool. Anyway, so I have it on heal, and heal is going to blend it in with the surround, or with the information around it, just similar to the what is that? Quick heal tool in Photoshop or something like that in Lightroom. Very similar. And it'll automatically grab an area, and you can remove, or you can move and change that spot heal. Thank you. And we can move and change that however we want to. Also, after it's been applied, we can see that we can still make adjustments to the active spot here on the upper section. There are 3 sliders, and that is adjusting or makes adjustments to this spot that we have selected. So I'll just turn the opacity of that up, and it'll get that blemish. It'll make that blemish go away. Boop. There we go. All gone. Now you can use this with a lot of details if you have like flyaway hairs or something like that, and you have portraits, and you want to painstakingly remove each one of the hairs. You can do that with this. You can go in and do a whole bunch of retouching as well. But there are a whole bunch of options that you have to do this to clean up images and stuff. Okay, cool. So you can also switch this to clone mode. So clone mode works better when you have like images that have some texture on it. So you can see that right here we have these pieces of tree or branches. So if I had some something that I wanted to clone out over here, this is what I would use the clone brush for. It would work better. But there's really nothing over there, so there's no reason for me to use that. That's okay. Still looks good. Okay, I'm going to close that. All right, so let's talk about making some basic adjustments now, because that's kind of the backbone of where you start making creative edits on your images. So now we've applied a preset. We've done some basic tweaks. Excuse me, some automated intelligent tweaks. Sure. Hey, will you guys wave at me and stuff if I start going too fast? Because I do this quite a lot. Like I edit in this program a lot. So I'm really fluent with it. But you feel free to ask any questions and stuff. I'm more than happy to help. So let's talk about just our little basic adjustments that we make to an image. So I'm going to open up the left panel here, or the left dock, and the histogram. Okay. So when I'm applying some adjustments here, I'm going to go back to my original layer here in the layers panel. You can see that the adjustments that I made, you can see all of in the histogram, these are all of the levels inside of the image. This is each one of these pixels are recorded right here and displayed. So as we make adjustments, we will see that these levels will change based off the adjustments that we make here in the basic panel. Or we can just grab a hold of these different sections inside of the histogram if that makes it a little bit easier for us. So for instance, here's the highlights, and I can just click on it and just drag it a little bit, make it a little bit brighter. And then you can see the histogram changes. And you can also see that that is changing the image as well. Well, it's actually not doing something that I care about or care for. So inside of the histogram on the right-hand side, this is this little arrow in the top here. If I click it, you can see that this is telling me these little red dots that's happening here on her blouse or on her shirt. That means that I'm missing information, or I have blown out highlights right there. So where my whites and my highlights sliders here are so high, that means I'm actually losing information. So it's better for me to bring those down a little bit and reclaim some of that information. You can see how now I don't have any of those little red dots. That's because I moved that white slider just a touch. Okay. I can see people looking really close. You want me to do that demo again? Check it out. If I move the white slider back up, you can see her shirt. And now it has those red splotches all over it. And if I turn it back down, then they'll go away. And I'm just making some basic adjustments here, just some tiny adjustments. They're very gingerly. I'm being very nice. Okay, so whenever you're editing inside of exposure, a good rule of thumb is that you start at the top of the panel and then you work your way down through the sliders. So if I was going to edit or make tweaks on each one of these sliders to edit this image, I'd start right here with exposure, and then I do contrast, and then highlights, et cetera, and work my way down through the list. Now, normally, well, all of the panels inside of exposure are set up in just a way that the more important or the stronger effects or sliders happen first. So let's say you're going to dial in your exposure, and then these ones down here, the whites, highlights, shadows, those are more like to what's the word I'm looking for? These are more for details. To calibrate it. That was the word I was looking for, but it's not a good word. Anyway, okay, so now that we have some tweaks that we made to this image and we have our edits the way that we want, I'll add just a little touch of clarity because I like a little bit of clarity on portraits. I'll close the basic panel, and then I'll go down. We already did some sharpening. We already talked about noise reduction. I'm going to go to the color panel now. Okay, so the color panel gives you a lot of options to control the colors inside of your image. You have your hue, saturation, and luminance controls here. You can use those to choose out individual colors or inside of the image to manipulate them. Okay, so I'm going to go to another image. I'll hit the right arrow. There you go. And so here's a really good example. We have two different skin tones going on inside of this image. So this is usually a tough spot, you know, where you have like somebody that's a little bit more pink next to somebody that's maybe a little bit more orange. You need to balance that out. It's a very common scenario. Well, in weddings it was for me, but you know, shooting portraits and things like that too. Especially in hot environments, people get flushed. Man, that's so hard to deal with. Anyway, we have right here on the color panel, what we're going to do is we can add like a cool and warm tone if we wanted to. That's just something nice to add to the image. Ooh, let me turn off that warning there. Otherwise we'll have little red or blue dots. Okay. So color toning, let's talk about this. Hue, saturation, luminance. I lost my spot on my notes. All right, cool. Okay, so I talked about making some adjustments to this red tone. So we can see in the baby skin that has a little bit bluish pink color. And so with the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders, I can just grab a hold of the reds channel. That's mostly where this skin tone falls. And I can grab it and just move it a little bit more toward the orange side. And then you can see that the baby just goes right over to that pink color, or that changes the baby skin tone there. I'm going to hold down the backslash key so that you can see the before and after. But we have some adjustments applied to this image as well. So we're doing some brightening. But you can see that that color that we just fixed a little bit of that. We still have some blue pink in the side of this baby's tones here. Okay, so let's also talk about bringing down the saturation here. Here's another thing that I want to do here is I want this image to read about this baby more than I do about what's going on in the background. So I'm going to do a cool trick here, and that is to take the shadows and anything that's in the shadows and desaturate the shadows. So if I turn it all the way down, you can see what's happening there. So all the shadows go completely dead. It's really flat. But if I do this really subtly, then it gives you this nice like color vignetting effect that happens so that it really draws the attention to the baby in the middle. So I like it. Anyway, that's handy. Also, let's go to the luminance channels here. So this is how bright the colors are inside the image. So I can choose each one, or I can select each one of these sliders inside of this panel if I want, and just drag each one to make them brighter or darker. And you'll see the image change as I do that. Like if I bring the red over to the bright, then all of the reds will get really bright. Of course, I don't want to do that. But I'll go here. Let's say I want to bring his tattoo and make his tattoo darker, you know, just to help it set it off because it fades down there, let's say. So I can go here and select the color picker. I think it's color picker. And then click and drag down on his tattoo. And you can see that just the tattoo got darker right there. So that's actually a mixture of two different colors, cyan and green. And you can see over here inside the panel, that was where the adjustment was made. That's just a quick way of targeting a color inside the image and making adjustments to it. So there's a whole bunch of adjustments and controls that you can do inside of this color panel. And those are just a few of the adjustments that we could make. I'm just doing some quick demonstrations. Okay. Let's go on. I'm going to close the color panel now. Let's talk about the tone curve panel. The tone curve is another powerful way of selecting colors and manipulating your images. There's a bunch of presets inside of each one of these panels as well. So as you select on any of the different, anything that looks like a drop down like this, that means that there are presets saved there as well. So we have presets over here in the presets panel that give a film look or an emulation. That's everything compared. Not within the program, no. Donna just asked if there are tutorials within the program, and that's no. The owner's manual's in the program, in the help menu. And then our website's full of videos and tutorials on how to use the program. Okay, so there's a bunch of presets right here, and these are like the curve editor. If you've used the curve editor before, you can select presets here just to do different options or apply different presets curves to the image. I'll choose this one, this Milky Blacks preset. So yeah, if you're at home with the curves editor, then you make yourself at home. You can click to add points and drag to move them around. You can drag off to remove points. And you can also use the sliders right down here below the curve editor to make adjustments to the curve instead of using points, which might be a little bit easier way of understanding how the curves work. Maybe well, I had trouble when I was first using curves. It was tough for me to learn how to use it. So I would have really loved these sliders. Anyway, you know, so yeah, and they work even if you have a curve and you know apply a bunch of points on the curve because you want it to be weird. You can still make adjustments to the sliders below as well. And just drag them off, delete, get them off there. Okay. So we've talked about that. Let's there's also split toning, which is down here at the bottom. Split toning adds or introduces tones to the images. Let's see here. Split toning is actually really popular in black and white, but there's a couple of color varieties as well. And so you can see they're really subtle, but here's a couple for color. So this one just adds a tone, this bluish tone right here. You can see the color tone. Adds a very faint color tone on the highlights and another faint one on the shadows. So I'm going to take this yellowy tone on the highlights off, and then I'm going to turn this down. There we go. Also, I don't like what I did here. There we go. Okay, much better. Okay, so also I'm working on this panel, right? So in this tone curve panel, I put on the Milky Blacks preset, and I also applied a split toning preset, which really is only going to show up a little bit in the shadows. So I can turn those presets, or I can turn those edits that I made off with the toggle. So if you're ever hunting around and saying, what did I do to this image? You can just turn that toggle off and say, oh, okay. And then you can find where you made those edits that way. Okay, so let's talk about making some more creative edits. I'll go to another image. Here we go. The laughing boy shot. So on this image, we've added, let me make sure, yes. So on this image, we've added a little bit of automatic adjustments. Let's also add a vignette. Vignettes are a great way to add or draw attention to the subject. So again, there are a bunch of presets here. You can select from a bunch of different kinds of vignettes. Also, anytime that you see a drop-down list right here, there's also an option right next to it to define your own presets. So if you find yourself choosing something and making the same adjustments over and over inside of your workflow, you can save these little bits out so that you can use them again in one click. Okay, so I'm going to just choose a preset here, and then I'm going to take the softness down. And then, so you can move these vignettes anywhere you want to inside the image pretty easily. And also you can see that there's distortion and lump size. This adds a more organic feel to the vignettes. And so you can play with these sliders all day to get them just the way that you want to. And I usually do fiddle with them quite often. So if you have a shape that you like and the proportions of it feel good, you can hit random seed if that effect isn't quite appearing the way that you want to. And it just randomly applies that, or randomly generates that mask around there again, or that vignette shape. So there we go. I like that one. So then I go back and then I'll soften it up. And then bring it way down because that was way too strong. There we go. And we can turn it off and on. And it's nice and subtle. There we go. Cool. All right. So bokeh, which is right here, is another way of subtly drawing attention to the images. This adds creative blurring effects. And these creative blurring effects, now there's a long list of presets inside of all of these as well. So this is kind of where you can see this come together. It's really great. Bokeh allows you to control where you want blurring effects to be applied in post. Yay. So anyway, this is a control, what is this, control spot? What is it? No, focus region. There we go. Yeah. So I'm adjusting the focus region right now, but I don't have a preset set. So inside of this presets list are a bunch of different presets. There are creative shapes, inside where you have, the little bright specular highlights inside of images. When things are out of focus, those little bokeh spots, they'll show up like different shapes like that. With these, you can add spiral and zoom and motion effects, or you can just select from blur properties of traditional lenses. So if you have any of these lenses that you use or regularly shoot with, you can use a preset that uses that same style of and type of blur. And then you can just adjust how much of it you want to apply to the image. You can see it right there. And then again, this focus region is how you can apply the blurring effect. So right now what I have going on is no blurring being applied to the boy's face in the middle, and this dotted line out here is where the blurring, this 12 number here, is being applied right here at the edge of the boy's shoulder. So here, let me close the bokeh panel. Then I'll turn that off and then turn it back on. See it? You can see that little subtle blurring applying there to his shirt. Tricks of the trade. Anyway, there's a bunch of things that you can do with bokeh, not just a little bit of blurring here on portraits. Okay, so let's talk about grain. Grain is really fantastic, especially when you're trying to make an image or give an image an analog feel or that type of thing. Exposure grain controls are something you really can't find in other software. The grain inside of exposure really does look like film grain. You can control where it appears. The grain appears inside of your image in exposure. So here I'm going to zoom into 100%. That's just clicking on the image. And then you can see where the grain is appearing. I think that you guys can see this grain there. I have it usually for videos. I turn the grain way up, stronger than I would ever use it on my images. But I like to use that for the demo so that people can see it as it's as I'm changing the different sliders and stuff around. So anyway, so just like film, you can change it so that, you know, maybe the grain appears strong in the highlights, but then you don't really see much in the shadows or in the midtones. Maybe you want to take it down in the midtones and pop a little bit in the shadows. You can do it however you want to set up the grain how you want. After you have this grain set up the way that you want to, you can save it as your own preset, just like before. You can also add grain, what is that? You can also add some different type of variety to the grain. You can add more roughness to it. You can also add some more variation to the way that the colors render. And push processing is essentially that'll add more contrast to the grain itself, and it'll make it much more strong. And then you can even change the size of the grain itself if you want to get really detailed. So for a portrait like this, the grain that I'm using right here is just a regular format, 35mm format, but you can also change from to other format grain structure, which will really just, those ones will just make the grain structure smaller. But, you know, I mean, if you've shot with plate film before or 120 film, then you definitely have that look. So now we have like a pleasing, way too strong grain effect that I'll turn it down just like so that it's nice and subtle. I like to see just a little bit of grain. You know, when you look at the image close, you can see a little bit of that grain, but I don't want it to be too strong. Okay, cool. Let us talk about overlays. So the overlays in exposure are some other creative elements that enable you to introduce things to your images, such as borders like this. Especially if you're making like older vintage ones, you have a bunch of different border options inside of exposure. And you can select from, I mean, there's tons and tons of them in here, but a lot of them are really cool. And they're useful in a bunch of different scenarios. So not only do we have borders, but there's also textures which go across the entire image, and light effects like, here, I'll pull one out for you. Like we can add some cool haze looking thing to it here. Purple, yes, purple. So we can move these around the image however we want to, you know, just to add some, I don't know, this kind of looks like the Northern Lights. They're just not the right color and upside down. But you get the idea. You can move them around however you want to add, you know, some sort of effect or flair to the image. And then as you move these around, you can of course save this as a preset. If you've heard me say that a couple of times, that's because I'm saying it over and over, because you can always save presets. I'm also going to use this protect place here in the overlays panel to protect his face from that effect there. Okay, cool. And I'll turn that down. There we go. You thought I was going to leave it all strong. No. Okay, so now we have some overlays applied to. So, okay, so we've done some creative work. We've shown how we can edit our image, shown how we can do some retouching. We've touched on a whole lot of the different presets or the different effects that you can create inside of exposure and different things that you can do to your images. So now let's kick it up a notch and we can talk about a little bit more like advanced uses. And one of those would be layers that we touched on before. And that would, so if we're looking right here, I'm going to right click. No, I'm going to right click. Here. I'll make those bigger so everybody can see them. Okay, so inside the layers panel, we have all of the adjustments that we made are being housed on this one layer. So if I hover my cursor over the thumbnail, you can see all of those different things that are listed are all adjustments that I made. Adds up pretty quick. But so on this layer, this is telling me that on this layer, all of these adjustments have been applied. And so if I want to make another layer, I can control all of those effects separately to this set of effects. Here's where it comes. Here's where I would use something like that. So we had a preset that we applied before to another image, but let's grab one for this image. So I'll go black and white just for something different. And bam. So I'm going to right click, new layer with preset, just like I did before. And that means I'm going to rename this one so that I don't get lost. Basic edits. So it's not all basic edits. We also have a vignette and things applied in this layer, but at least now we have some differentiation when we're looking at the layers panel. So here's our Tri-X preset, and here are our basic edits. And we have those both being applied to this image at the same time right here. So let's so this is a pretty basic use of the layers panel. We have one preset that's in this layer. We have one preset in this layer. We have a couple of edits on the next layer. This is a black and white preset. And black and white presets can do a couple of things aside from turning your image black and white. Let's delete. And I want to do something a little more crazy. Oops. I'm going to go to the color, and then here are graduated filters. So yeah, this is kind of weird, right? You wouldn't think graduated filters on a portrait, but okay, so I'm going to right click on this one, this color wash orange, new layer with preset. Okay, so we can see the effect on the image. It's on the left hand side. It's just adding this orange tone. Okay, I actually like the play of this pink that we added in this orange tone. I don't know why, but anyway. So it's just a little bit of an orange tone. So if I hover my cursor over this image right here, we can see it says color wash orange. Okay, so if we go to the color panel, we can see there's a color right here, an orange color wash that's being applied at 30% right on this layer. So we can make that stronger, and it'll add more of a color wash effect to the image. We can make an adjustment to the extends of this filter that's being applied, or this mask. So you can see inside the thumbnail in the layers panel, you have black on one side and white on the other. We can adjust that. That's what's it's being controlled right here by this gradient. Okay, so this gradient is telling our image where this layer is going to be applied to the, where the adjustment from this orange is going to be applied on the image. That's what this controls. So when it's black, the layer's off. The layer's like it won't affect the image beneath it. When it's white, it's on. and then this image will affect, or this layer will affect the image beneath it. It's pretty simple. So we have this really, overdone orange thing here, so I can turn that down with a little bit more control over it. Okay. And then maybe I could duplicate that layer, do the same thing. Now I can choose maybe that, and then I can invert that mask. Nope, I messed it up. There, okay, same mask, switch around. Oh. All right, cool. My mask isn't being nice. I'm going to delete this layer. Okay, cool. So I have my orange on this left over here, and that's just like another little edit that we made. I'm going to go back here and my overlays. I'm going to make that a little brighter. Just a little bit though. All right, cool. So I have a color wash that I had put on here just a little bit to give them a little bit more brightness on that side, just so that we have a little bit more color, because that black was, or that background was very boring. If I hold down the space bar key, you can see the original image. That's straight out of the camera. And then afterward, looks like this. So I do want to point out a few things. When I put on that bokeh, that blurring layer before, you can see little bits, like it seems like something that you might overlook. So if I hold down the backslash key, if you look here on his hat, where he has this edge of focus plane where it grabbed his hat, right on both edges, right on the edge of that image on the top. Hope you guys can see that. So the shot's right, the focus is nailed. It's right there on his eye. But on the top side, because she's shooting at like what, f2, then we have a little bit of fall off happening here, right? So his nose here is not actually crisp, and his ears back there are not actually crisp. Well, because of that shot, we have a condition here where on the edge of the frame, it's super sharp. And that is such a distraction. So your eye is going to go right up there. I mean, yeah, cute kid, you're going to look and smile and all that stuff, but then you're going to go, what? Wait, what happened there? So that's another good reason to go and put on a little bit of that bokeh, just to add a little touch of some softness to bring your attention into that one spot right there in the center of your image like that. Okay, cool. All right, so we talked about layers. Let's talk about something else that we can do with our layers. I'm going to hit add layer. Okay, so we have our layer here of this little boy, and we don't have anything applied to it. So we're going to make a selection here, and then we're going to apply adjustments based off that selection. So I have my third layer that I just made. Now I click the brush icon, or I select the thumbnail. If you select right here this white thumbnail, the mask layer thumbnail, it automatically opens up the brush panel. And so down here in the color constraints, where I want to bring your attention. Color constraints allow you to make a mask that's generated from information inside of the photo. So in this case, we have this picture of the boy, and we're going to use the skin, his color, to make a mask and just apply it directly to the skin. So I'll click the hue eyedropper and just bring it over, and you can see that it's giving me a display or readout, and I can select his skin tone right there. Now, I also have some of the background and stuff selected inside of that. You could see if I click show mask, it'll give me a red highlight and saying all of this is being selected right now. So obviously I need some cleaning. I need to do some cleaning up, so I can drag the different handles down here on saturation and luminance to restrict the amount of images or the amount of information that I'm selecting, just like so. And what we're aiming for is to just have his skin selected. Come on now. Okay, so there we go. I'm gonna turn off show mask. All right. Pretty close, pretty close. So now that we have his face selected with the mask, then I can apply a preset. So right now we can see in the thumbnail here in the layers panel, you can see where it's selected. It has his face selected, right? And so I have a little bit of some edge here selected as well, and I can edit that if I wanted to with the mask. See, I have my brush, and if I select the eraser brush, then I can also remove this area from the layer so it won't be affected there. It's giving me a prompt telling me that I didn't do anything in the layer yet, and I will explain in a second. Okay, there. So we've just removed that, right? So now we've quickly have a mask of his face, just the skin, and we have this nice cool toning thing is going on. So a lot of times, like especially doing wedding photography, because that's what I did, you'd have people that had, you know, their skin would have some texture to it. And when you picked up a lot of skin texture, when it wasn't enough that I wanted to go in and hit it with, you know, the spot heal tool, but it wasn't so much that I want, you know, it was something, it needed to have something done. So skin smoothing is something that I used a lot. And this is a quick way of doing it. So if I hit soften skin, we can see that we've already made our selection of the boy's skin already. And then as we apply it, we can see that it totally mangled him because it's way too strong for this image, but it's only being applied to the boy here. It's only being applied to his skin. And so I'll just take the same thing as I normally do is like on this layer here, and I'll just take it and take this opacity down until it looks correct, until I'm not blurring out any of his features or anything like that. Also, I wanted to point out that as we apply this, you can still see with it way too strong, you can still see that our selection did a good job. His teeth are not selected, his nostrils are not selected, his eyelashes are not selected. That was all done automatically when we were using the color constraints to create our mask boundary. Anyway, I'm going to turn that back down. Okay, cool. So now we have creative effects that we've added to this. We've put some layers onto it. We've applied, this was a generated mask here by using the color constraints information inside of the image. So if I had another image that had someone with a similar skin tone to this kid, I could essentially copy and paste the layer here, and it would work with pretty good accuracy between images if the tone is similar. Okay, so let's talk about, so after we do a bunch of edits and things inside of exposure to our images, right? We well, just like we did, we have a lot of history. So every time that you go and you make an edit in exposure, your history is remembered. And inside the history panel, you can access each one of those steps. And so you can go all the way back to when you originally brought the image in, and you can see like it really adds up quickly as you go down through all of the little changes that you've made. But you can select each one of those stages. And if you want, you can click to go back to that stage in your editing history. Yeah. So actually, there's just a couple more things to point out, and we're just about done with our demonstration. That is exporting. When you're exporting, you can export one image at a time. You can export all of your images at a time. You can do that just like when you were importing, where we set up where we wanted that to happen. So if I hit export, we can select where we want the image to be saved to the desktop. We can name it with an appropriate, and you can save a preset for this naming as well. You can set your file settings for if you want to be a JPEG or a TIFF, etc. If it's going to be sharpened, what the color space is going to be. All of those options are here. You can even share what size, your image size. And you can even add watermarks if you have watermarks set up, or you have those created automatically and applied to those images. Also, there's a quick export dialog that allows you to export using recipes. So you can see them all right here. Here's Facebook share, et cetera, et cetera. If I hit quick export, then each one of these recipes, I can select each one of them if I want to, and then just hit export. And so you can see I have 3 selected: Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I hit export, and it'll export those 3 versions of this same image automatically, and I'm all done. So that does conclude the demonstration. So yeah, so we can turn our attention over to Q&A. It's fine with me if you want to unmute and you guys can ask questions. I do have a couple of questions here that I wanted to hit up. So, Melvin, do we have good phone support? Well, we do have phone support. And if you're lucky, then you get to talk with me. Okay, no, we do have phone support. We have lots of support. The email is really the easiest way for us to do things, just so that we can actually see things on your computer as we're helping diagnose problems. A lot of the time we get calls from people and then they say, it's not doing it. And then we have no idea what that means because we can't see what they're talking about. So yeah, we do phone support if needed. Are there tutorials within the program? There are not tutorials. I think I pointed that one out earlier. We have those over on the website, and you can get to the owner's manual inside the software.
And if I can figure out how to unmute everyone, I will. Does anybody know how to do that on Zoom? Of course, you're all
All you
muted.
do is click. All you do is click unmute.
Oh, on each person?
Yeah. Or they can do it themselves.
Oh, Tony. Okay.
Anybody has a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. I think you can do that.
Yeah. You were working in Lightroom and you wanted to go and move and migrate over to Exposure. We have a couple of things that we did inside of Exposure to help ease that process for you. One thing is there is a Lightroom migration tool that will help grab your images and metadata and information from Lightroom, bring it over into Exposure along with your images. And there's another thing, and that is I'm just drawing a blank on it, Lightroom automatic. Oh, that is the keyboard shortcuts. We actually have keyboard shortcuts inside of Exposure here. If I pull up the preferences panel, then we can see, where are they? They're right here, shortcuts. So inside of this, we actually have shortcuts saved. Here's a Lightroom compatibility shortcut. So you can change the shortcuts in Exposure to be more Lightroom centric or friendly if that's how you edit. So it's a couple of things there. Okay. So hoping that answers. Let's see here. I'm seeing if I have unmutable powers, which I do not have. I see.
Gave it to Steve so he can figure it out.
Donna, there's an unmute all button at the top of the chat box, not the top of the participant box, but under that.
You're host now. You can do
Oh,
it.
I'm host now?
Yeah.
How do I do that?
I did it.
Oh. Okay, everybody, I think I've got it. You can all unmute,
All right.
and then you can talk to Jimmy directly.
So, Jimmy, it's Donna.
Yeah.
I have a question. I was importing to Exposure a lot of images, and they were coming across and they weren't looking sharp. So I imported the same images to Lightroom, and they did look sharp enough that I knew I could sharpen them. Was that something maybe I did on the import?
It's possible. That's bizarre. I mean, the first thing I would do is reset the image to see what was going on there.
Okay.
The Exposure will process the images very neutral. So it's not going to add a bunch of aggressive sharpening. It's not going to make colors be over, saturated when it just opens the image. Like it's just raw, straight raw.
Okay.
So
Lightroom.
the rendering in Lightroom, like even if the file hasn't had any edits to it, made to it, it does add some other, things. So it's not just like straight raw image.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a website through SmugMug. Do you have a plugin for SmugMug to go directly to SmugMug?
No, we don't have something where you can upload directly to that. When you're uploading to SmugMug, is it just like a folder? Can you make it like a Dropbox folder or something on your computer?
I don't know. I do it directly through Lightroom, and I just drag the photos into the SmugMug, and then I publish it Lightroom into SmugMug, and it's just there.
Okay.
I was
There's
just-
no integration with SmugMug right now, but you can make the quick export presets. You can probably make a preset that will export at the size that you need for your SmugMug site, and that's with the appropriate, what is that? Color space, and it's probably going to be a JPEG, 8-bit. You can set all that stuff up so it will automatically save the image for that, and then you can just upload the whole folder, just drag and drop in your browser.
So the other question that I have is, someone else I think alluded to it. All of my photos are on an external hard drive, and they're all Lightroom, and they all have catalogs, obviously. If I were to bring that hard drive, if I were to purchase exposure and bring that hard drive into play, is the fact that they're on Lightroom catalogs, has that affected it any way, or is there anything I have to do to change that?
I think what he's asking is, will it damage the Lightroom library?
Right.
If you import into exposure.
Yeah, no, it won't. Exposure doesn't do any kind of changes to the files.
Okay, so it's just going to import them like it would from a camera card. It's not going to actually take those images. It's simply copying them from your Lightroom.
No, it won't do that. It leaves them right where they are. Just looks at it.
Right. So it's a non-destructive import.
Right. Thanks, Fritz.
Okay. Yeah. And I've used exposure for years. So as a plugin, so the film emulation, so a lot of you that have seen my images, a lot of those are exposure film emulations over the years.
Nice.
I have a question. What if you don't use Lightroom at all? Is there why would people be using both? In other words, is there any advantage to using exposure and Lightroom, or exposure as a standalone program?
Well, I work here, so I use exposure as a standalone, but I actually, as a wedding photographer, I did away with Lightroom in my workflow, and that used to be my workhorse. And so, I mean, it was years ago, but yeah, it's the workflow is a lot quicker than you expect for like the whole kit and caboodle through import all the way through, organizing and then editing. Like it's really quick. And so it saved probably about 60% of my time, and it cut out of my workflow in editing.
If you don't use Lightroom and you're looking to be able to find images, this is a lot simpler because,
definitely
Lightroom's catalog has sucked for 30 years. And I think anybody who's used Lightroom for years has lost their catalog several times. Yeah. I've got like 14,000 images just floating around somewhere that, that disappeared from here and there.
I can second that. The reason that I'm interested in exposure is the one main overriding reason is Lightroom's catalogs. They're the biggest pain in the ass. It's just a convoluted mess. You buy a new hard drive and you got to figure out how to get another catalog, and on and on and on. So that's my take on it. I think Lightroom's fine, but the catalog system just is not the way to go.
The reason I'm introducing you to this program is two reasons, and I mentioned in the beginning. The catalog system. I've been using Lightroom since version 1. Some of you may know that before I took my job as an instructor at Oregon State University many years ago, I was my workshops, myself personally, my workshops were supported by Adobe. They don't. Okay, I find the catalog system to be a little unwieldy after all these years, and I too have lost photos. And what is funny is, years after I've lost photos, and I know where the heck I will just happen to plug in a drive, like Mel just said, and I'll stumble across the photo that I lost 10 years ago. And it's like I go out and get yeah. So
it's like finding $1 in your pants.
Well, yeah, thank you. That's exactly. I'm trying to think of a way to say that. Yeah. And it doesn't happen as often with me now, but I still have these things happen. That's the reason. And the other reason, and I think Jim did a good job of this. All the presets, everybody on here that at least that I know, there are a few people here I don't know personally, but everybody else, you're all creative photographers. You're not trying to. If you were working for the press corps and you didn't want to, you don't put pretty frames around your pictures or do vignettes. The pictures go straight out and they get published. We make correct the exposure and the sharpening. That's it. But for us, mostly like Fritz makes great use of Exposure X6 and other apps besides this, right on his iPhone, to create his really dynamic, creative images. Another one I just saw yesterday on Facebook, a self-portrait, was fantastic, Fritz. Very powerful. But so you've got access here to creative. But the last thing I'll say, and then I'll let Jim have it back again, is that yes, this works. If you do want to keep with Lightroom, because just like a lot of the features, it plugs right into it, or use it as standalone.
Yeah.
So either way, and as far as cost, if you did want to drop Lightroom, this is less expensive. So that's a minor thing for most of us here. Okay, I'll give it back to you, Jim.
All right, cool.
Jim, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I've been a real problem with Lightroom at the moment. Well, about 40,000 of my pictures have the little question mark on them. There's no way you can do salvage those by transferring, is there?
That means that Lightroom can't find where those original images are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, that's what it means.
Yep.
They're on a thumb drive. I mean, a zip drive.
Yeah, did you have like an external or something and you disconnected it or turned your computer off or sneezed and then it just doesn't see it anymore? Is that what happened?
Well, when I turn the computer on, if I go in Lightroom, I can find the picture I want, but there's a question mark on it, so I can't do it. I can't send it to Steve, for example, to show.
Yeah. Do you know, it must have been saved somewhere on a file. Likely was on a drive that was disconnected.
Now, if you're using exposure and you're setting exposure up for the first time, drive, will it look through that whole drive, or will you have to have a specific folder for it to look at? And the reason I ask is because with Lightroom, if you do try to find old images, you can't simply go, well, I know it's on my whatever drive it is.
Yeah,
you
can
search the drive. You have to have a specific folder.
Yeah, you can just go here. You still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can just add. This is to look in subfolders. I'll turn this option on.
Right.
Right. So if I hit bookmark and I bookmark like the root drive, which I could go and do, or there. I just go to my home, and I can do that. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah, and would it search through all those subfolders looking for JPEGs or images?
As long as this option right here on the folders panel is on,
right.
then yes.
So, because Lightroom, of course, won't do that.
No.
No, and so for your question, Henry, what I was saying is the problem with Lightroom when it's looking for lost files. They're not actually lost. You just may not remember where they are specifically on that drive.
Yeah.
And of course,
you
it's
rename the folder.
Right, or you rename the file.
Yeah.
Because Lightroom is not very smart. So
Yeah.
if you rename the file, Lightroom won't know that, and suddenly that file doesn't exist, that image. So what he's saying is, with something like exposure, if you start fresh, then you should be able to go to that hard drive where you have those located, and it will pull them in there. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
As long as it hasn't been deleted.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But Lightroom doesn't care. That's the reason it's really hard if you do lose images.
Yeah. Yeah, because it builds that catalog again.
Right. And this is
catalog.
much simpler.
Yeah, it is.
I'd like to address something real quickly, what Hank said. Hank, quick question for you. With those photos you can't find, if they're stored on external hard drive, is that external hard drive plugged into your computer when you're working in Lightroom?
Yes.
Wow.
And it still cannot find them.
Right.
Then what you want to do is make a Zoom call with me, and you and I will find those photos, okay? I don't
Okay.
want to take the time here to do it. If somebody else has the same problem, you can join Hank and I. But Hank, you let me know when you want to do that. When we get off this call, send me an email.
The problem, in my opinion, is the catalog. They're on the hard drive, but the catalog can't recognize them for some reason. I've been through this 25 times, if not more. And it's crazy because the files are there. They're on the hard drive, but there's some corruption or you've made an error with the catalogs. So
Mel, you join Hank and I, okay? The two of you let me know. We'll make a Zoom call just like this.
it sounds like Fritz and I are on the board for exposure. We should have a disclaimer here that we don't get any money from exposure. We don't work for them. I'm just joking, but yeah, it's the catalog is just. The minute I heard about exposure, Steve, and I jumped on it because I want to get rid of those catalogs. They're just driving me nuts, and they're driving Henry nuts as well. He can't find all these images.
Melvin, I've known Henry for about 30 years or more. He took a workshop for me in the 80s. And they're not driving him nuts. He is nuts, right, Henry?
All right.
Awesome.
Okay. Any other questions?
Things that I'd like to mention here before we go, and that is that if you do want to reach out and get in contact with us, you're welcome to do so. You can also connect with other exposure users by joining our Facebook users group, the Exposure Users Group. Also, if you want to post any of your work that you've edited with exposure with us and other exposure users, we encourage you to do so and to use our hashtag #MyExposureEdits.
Okay. And also, I will be sending everybody Jimmy's direct mobile phone number. You can call him any 24/7.
Yes,
He's available for
FaceTime, please. Only FaceTime.
And by the way, I'd like to thank Tony K and Susan Harlan for joining us. I don't know you two, but it's welcome to our small group. I see they're both muted, but if you'd like to say hi, you can. Otherwise, welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question, Steve.
Yes, Rita.
It's slightly out of bounds. I am a Photoshop user, but I've taken your class, of course, in Lightroom, and I was eager to hear about exposure. Just off the cuff and no details needed, what is the advantage of either Lightroom or Exposure 6 over Photoshop? I cannot imagine the horror of losing 14,000 images. What would make it worth that?
That's an answer for Jimmy or for Finley.
Photoshop, the workflow in Photoshop is definitely for one image at a time. So depending on the type of work that you do, it's kind of a different tool. Lightroom was made really, it's just like the, Camera Raw, Adobe Camera Raw. Lightroom's just an easier Adobe Camera Raw, really. But exposure is built so that you can get through your organizing tasks as well as the processing tasks. And I think Photoshop's not going to be able to do anything like that, where it helps with the organizing of your images and cataloging and, you know, filtering, that kind of thing. Where Photoshop, you need to do that with Bridge, or you need to do it, you know, by yourself on your, you know, using your own folder system. Does that make sense?
It does. I just can't imagine the risk of losing your images over a 20-year period. I mean, you certainly, Mel and Hank, you have to have everything backed up multiple times to sleep at night. And I've never lost images on Photoshop.
Well, it's not that you've lost them. They're there.
You can't find them.
Well, Lightroom can't find them. That's the problem because of the catalogs.
But the other thing, Lightroom, Photoshop, exposure is not Photoshop. Photoshop is a much more involved program than Lightroom. So exposure is a different version of Lightroom. And like you said, it's non-destructive. So even if you wanted to try it, importing those files, your Lightroom, your Photoshop files are still there, and you still have Photoshop. But this is not a replacement for for Photoshop. This is a replacement or a different tool to use with Lightroom. And Lightroom is nothing more than a digital darkroom, and the same thing with exposure. So, I mean, right.
What Photoshop, as Jimmy said, Photoshop really is for processing one image at a time. And you can do a lot of really powerful things in it. What makes Lightroom and exposure important to the photographer is the ability to catalog, to sort, to find your images. All these things for all these creative tools are great, and it's good to have them. But the important thing is organizing, cataloging, and finding your images. And what I hear over and over again, as Mel and others have said, they can't find their images. And I've had a similar problem after all these years. That happens to me. It doesn't happen all the time anymore, but it does happen. And so the big difference then for Rita to know is not that if you want to do compositing, if you want to put flying fish over Los Angeles and flying fish over New York City, you need Photoshop. That's for compositing. These are special. Photoshop was created for the graphic artist. It was not created for photographers. It was a plug-in to a suite of programs that Adobe was buying up or creating for graphic designers who were trying to take the market away from, I can't remember it now anymore. It's gone now. They put them out of business. The big graphic design tool. And they did that. But Photoshop was designed for graphic artists in order to manipulate photos and place them in magazine ads and billboard ads and other graphic, brochures. That's what Photoshop was for. Lightroom is that part. 20% of Photoshop was for the photographer, and that 20% is what you find in Camera Raw, Adobe product, and that 20% is what you find in Lightroom, and that's what you find in the catalog area of EX6. So the importance of these programs is not manipulating your image. That's great. The importance is being able to find your images.
Thank you.
Any comments on or comparisons with a couple of the other programs, like Focus or the one that comes out of Denmark?
Okay. Jimmy, can you compare this to some other programs as far as organizing cataloging?
The one that comes out of Denmark.
What's that?
Is that Affinity Photo?
I'm blanking on the name of it.
Maybe DxO.
Yeah. Serif's from
Capture One.
Oh.
Which one is that?
Capture One.
Yeah, Capture One. Yes, Capture. Yeah, compare that to Capture One, Jimmy.
Okay.
Briefly.
Compare it to Capture One.
Because Capture One has
Capture
a
One has a
cataloging
lot
system.
of doodads and tiddlywinks. It has a lot of similar controls as Exposure does. It has some organizational tools as well, and it, from what I understand, it has a whole bunch of controls. It's more for production work, I'd say, for doing stuff where you're on a big team and you have very demanding coloring needs for magazines or whatnot. I think that would kind of be what that would be for. That was originally, it was just a raw processor. I think Finley, you might be able to speak to that. Capture was just for raw. They didn't have any interface until, I don't know, a couple of years back. All it was just for raw.
That sounds right. It was originally for their specific cameras, I think, and then they opened it up to processing raw for other.
Phase digital back.
Yeah.
Well, you'll notice with Capture One, when you go to purchase it, it has options to purchase it just for the Sony camera, just for the Canon camera. So as Finley was saying, it was originally for specific cameras. Then they began to work for all cameras. It works particularly well for the Fuji camera, by the way, in terms of the color and sharpening due to the Fuji, and also for the Sigma with the Fovan chip. It has a better interface than, let's say, Lightroom. I don't know how Exposure works with those particular processors, or rather sensors.
Capture One, because I think I'm the only one.
What's that, Fritz?
I'm sorry. I'm probably the only person here that uses Fuji cameras. And the Capture One really, for the last couple of years, has been pushed over anything else that had been out there because of its ability to import Fuji files from the X series of cameras. Because Lightroom, a lot of people had problems importing Lightroom into Lightroom from Fuji. I've never really noticed a difference, but a lot of people have. And so that's really Capture One came out. Really is a raw processor for specific cameras.
As far as working with the images, Lightroom is really focused on Canon and Nikon. Capture One tends to focus on specific cameras also, but they sell the program separately. So if you just use Sony, you buy the Sony module, the Sony version. But if you want to use any camera, you might buy if you have a Fuji and a Sony camera, then you have to buy the full version. Capture One is quite a bit more expensive than both Lightroom and Exposure 6. People who use it are really dedicated to it. So I'm not a user of it. I do use it from time to time, by the way, but I really use it for what I mainly use Capture One for is tethering my camera. It works very, very well for tether, and when I do studio work. The portraits I just did in Beverly Hills or Century City, Los Angeles about a month or two ago, I used Capture One to tether because Lightroom doesn't tether the Sony any longer. Like I say, they're focused on Canon and Nikon.
How about Hasselblad's program Focus? Anybody use that?
Oh, how does this? Jimmy Hank just got himself a brand new toy, a Hasselblad.
Okay.
Something to keep him entertained on the winter nights. How does Exposure 6 work with a Hasselblad raw file?
Well, first off, we need to make sure that we are supporting on the model that you're shooting with. I've edited Hassies. Oh, right. Actually, I think I used Phase. But yeah, if it's supported, then it'll work fine. I mean, you might have an issue like if it's not a supported camera, then we can convert to a DNG and you can edit it just like that.
Everybody here, you can get a 30-day free trial. At the end of the 30 days, if you like what you see and it's working for you with your Hasselblad or any other camera, then I think in my newsletter, and I'll put it again in the January newsletter, you get a 10% off coupon for to buy it up till January 31st. If you have my last newsletter, that coupon's in there, and I'll put it in the January newsletter. If you're not on my mailing list, sign up on my website, and you'll get my newsletter with those discount coupons. Okay. Is there anything else? We've gone about almost 2 hours here. We were only supposed to go an hour. You're gonna have to, anything? Donna, who's saying, Donna, is that you talking? Well, if there's nothing else, Jimmy,
Thank you.
okay, is that it?
No problem.
Okay, anybody have any questions? You
Anybody
know
has
how to
any
get in touch
questions,
with
yeah,
me.
reach
Jimmy, thank you very much for the great program. Let's have a,
I had nothing to do with you, but anyway.
thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you all for showing up. It was great.
And send me your mobile number so I can share it with everybody.
Thank you.
I'll get right to that.
I see. Okay, bye everyone. I'm gonna sign us out here. Okay.
All right. Take care. Thanks, y'all.
Call me if anybody can contact me if you need to. Bye bye.